Most people in that Walmart line thought they were watching a woman count coins. What they didn't know was that a single photograph hidden among her groceries was about to stop a billionaire's world cold. The steady beep of barcode scanners echoed through the crowded Walmart on a rainy Thursday evening. Shopping carts rattled across the polished floor. Children begged for candy near the checkout lanes. Somewhere in the distance, a store announcement crackled over the speakers. It was the kind of ordinary scene nobody remembered, unless they happened to be standing in lane 12. Sarah Mitchell lowered her eyes as she emptied a handful of coins onto the conveyor belt. Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. They scattered across the black rubber surface with a metallic clatter that seemed much louder than it should have been. Her cheeks burned. She could feel people watching. The cashier offered a polite smile, but Sarah recognized the expression. It was the same look she had seen dozens of times before. Sympathy mixed with discomfort. The look people gave when they realized someone was struggling more than they were. Beside her stood 6-year-old Lucy, clutching the sleeve of her faded pink jacket. The little girl stayed unusually quiet. She had learned long ago not to ask for toys at the checkout line. She had learned not to point at candy bars or colorful magazines. She had learned that every dollar mattered. And somehow, that knowledge made Sarah's heart ache more than anything else. Outside, rain tapped softly against the giant front windows. Inside, Sarah carefully counted her coins for the third time. Her fingers trembled slightly from exhaustion. She had finished a morning shift cleaning offices, spent the afternoon delivering groceries, and still had another shift waiting later that night. Sleep had become a luxury she barely remembered. "You're okay, Mommy," Lucy whispered, reaching for her hand. Sarah forced a smile. "I know, sweetheart." But she wasn't okay. Not really. Her checking account held less than $3. Rent was due in 5 days. Lucy's inhaler prescription needed to be refilled. The transmission in her 12-year-old Honda had started, making a grinding sound that she couldn't afford to investigate. Every problem felt like a wave crashing against a wall that was already cracking. The cashier began scanning the items. A gallon of milk, whole wheat bread, generic cereal, apples, peanut butter, a box of cough medicine, a refill package for a child's inhaler spacer. Nothing unnecessary, nothing indulgent. Every item had been calculated before entering the cart. Every item served a purpose. Sarah watched the total climb higher on the screen. $28, $32, $36. Her stomach tightened. She silently recounted the coins in her head. Behind her, the line grew longer. People shifted impatiently. A man glanced at his watch. Another customer sighed loudly. Sarah stared down at the conveyor belt and wished she could disappear. Then she noticed something that made her chest tighten even more. One of the cereal boxes had partially opened during the trip to the store. The cardboard flap bent outward, exposing the corner of a worn photograph tucked inside. Her breath caught. She quickly reached for it, but not before someone else noticed. Standing directly behind her was a tall man in a charcoal overcoat. Mid-40s. Clean-cut. Calm. The kind of man who looked completely out of place waiting in a Walmart checkout lane. Nathan Brooks had spent the day negotiating a business acquisition worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Yet at that moment, his attention wasn't on his phone, his schedule, or the people around him. His eyes were fixed on the photograph sticking out from the cereal box. Sarah quickly pushed it back inside. To her, it was simply an old family picture she carried everywhere. One of the few things she had left of her mother. But Nathan had already seen enough. His expression changed instantly. The casual patience disappeared from his face. His shoulders stiffened. The color drained from his features. For a brief moment, it looked as if the noise of the entire store had vanished around him. Because the woman smiling in that faded photograph was someone he recognized. Someone he shouldn't have recognized. Someone connected to a mystery that had haunted his family for more than 20 years. And as the coins continued rattling across the checkout counter, Nathan Brooks stood completely frozen. The cashier looked from the screen to the pile of coins and then back to Sarah. Her smile remained kind, but the numbers on the register did not change. The total sat there waiting, bright and unforgiving. Sarah swallowed hard and pushed another handful of change forward. Lucy squeezed her hand a little tighter. Nathan remained motionless behind them. His eyes never left the cereal box. More specifically, the photograph hidden inside it. It was impossible. At least, that was what his mind kept repeating. Impossible. Yet the image he had glimpsed felt burned into his memory. A young woman with bright eyes standing beside a man Nathan recognized immediately. His father, 23 years earlier. Before the accident. Before the unanswered questions. Before a mystery that had quietly shaped his family for decades. The cashier finished counting. "You are still short $4.27. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Not from embarrassment this time. From exhaustion. The kind that settled deep into a person's bones after years of carrying more than they should. She immediately reached for the cough medicine. "That is okay," she said softly. "I will put this back." Lucy looked at the box. "But Mommy, Dr. Evans said I need that medicine." Sarah forced another smile. "We will come back for it later, sweetheart." She knew they would not. Not unless one of her delivery shifts paid unusually well. Not unless something unexpected happened. Nathan watched the exchange in silence. Around them, customers shifted impatiently. Shopping carts rolled by. Someone cleared their throat dramatically. The world continued moving while Sarah carefully calculated which necessities she could afford to lose. She picked up the medicine first, then one bag of apples, then the peanut butter. Every item felt like a small defeat. "No," Nathan heard himself say. The word came out before he had fully decided to speak. Sarah turned. Her tired blue eyes met his for the first time. "Excuse me. Please keep everything in the cart." His voice was calm, controlled. "I have it." Sarah immediately shook her head. "That is very kind, but I cannot let you do that." Nathan reached for his wallet. "It is $4.27. It is not about the amount." Sarah's voice remained polite but firm. "You have already been waiting long enough." Nathan studied her expression. Pride, dignity, gratitude, all existing at the same time. He recognized it because his mother had worn the same look during difficult years after his father's accident. "Then let me call it a favor from one parent to another," he said. Sarah hesitated. Lucy looked hopefully between them. Finally, Sarah nodded once. "Thank you." The cashier finished the transaction. Relief flashed across Lucy's face when the medicine remained in the bag. That small reaction affected Nathan more than he expected, because children should not have to understand financial stress. Yet this little girl clearly did. As the receipt printed, Sarah gathered her groceries. The photograph slipped partially from the cereal box again. This time Nathan saw it clearly. His pulse quickened. The young woman in the picture wore a denim jacket and stood beside his father near a lakeside dock. The photograph was old, faded, creased from years of handling. But there was no mistaking either face. Nathan felt the ground shift beneath him. His father had spent years searching for that woman. Years. Sarah noticed where he was looking. Her expression softened slightly. "My mother," she said. "I keep that picture with me everywhere." Nathan struggled to keep his voice steady. "You were close. She was all I had." Sarah carefully tucked the photo back into the box. "She passed away 5 years ago." Nathan's chest tightened. 5 years. Another door potentially closed forever. Lucy tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mommy, we are going to miss the bus." Sarah nodded and adjusted the grocery bags. "Thank you again," she told Nathan. Most people would not have helped. Nathan watched them begin walking away. Then Lucy suddenly turned back. "Mom says good people always show up when you need them most." The little girl smiled before hurrying after her mother. Nathan stood there long after they disappeared toward the exit. Rain streaked the giant windows. The automatic doors opened and closed. Shoppers came and went. But Nathan barely noticed any of it. Because for the first time in more than 20 years, a missing piece of his family story had just walked out of Walmart carrying groceries and an old photograph. The rain had intensified by the time Sarah and Lucy reached the bus stop. Water streamed down the glass shelter while headlights reflected across the wet pavement like streaks of gold. Sarah shifted the grocery bags from one hand to the other and glanced at her watch. She still had barely enough time to get Lucy home, prepare dinner, and make it across town for her evening cleaning shift. Lucy leaned against her side. "The nice man seemed sad," she said quietly. Sarah looked down. "What makes you say that?" "His eyes." Lucy shrugged. People smile with their mouths when they want to be polite. He looked like he was smiling with his mouth, but not with his eyes. Sarah almost laughed. Children notice things adults missed. Maybe he was just having a long day. The bus arrived with a hiss of air brakes. 10 minutes later, they were heading toward the small apartment complex they called home. Meanwhile, Nathan remained in the Walmart parking lot long after his driver had pulled the car around. Rain tapped softly against the roof of the black SUV. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from executives, lawyers, and board members waiting for decisions. He ignored every one of them. His thoughts remained fixed on the photograph. 23 years earlier, his father had kept that same picture in a leather notebook that never left his desk. Nathan remembered seeing it as a teenager. He remembered asking who the woman was. And he remembered the unusual silence that followed. His father had always answered questions. Except that one. The memory returned with startling clarity. Some people change your life in a single day, his father had said. And sometimes you spend years trying to thank them. Nathan had never forgotten those words. Yet before he could ask more, the conversation had ended. Months later came the accident that permanently altered his father's health. Then years of rehabilitation. Then his father's death. The mystery remained unsolved. Until tonight. Nathan reached for his phone and opened a contact he rarely used. Thomas Green, family attorney, family historian, family problem solver. The call connected immediately. Nathan, I need a favor. Thomas laughed softly. That usually means you are about to create a great deal of work for me. I need every file my father kept regarding a woman named. Nathan stopped, realizing he did not actually know her name. Only her face. Only the photograph. I need access to all of his private journals from the years before the accident. Silence lingered briefly. That is unusual. Can you do it? Of course. Thomas paused. Did you find something? Nathan stared through the rain-covered windshield. I think I found someone. Across town, Sarah unlocked the door to apartment 3B. The familiar scent of laundry detergent and old carpet greeted them. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms. Worn furniture. A kitchen barely large enough for 2 people to stand in comfortably. But it was clean. It was safe. And for now, it was home. Lucy immediately placed her school backpack near the table. Sarah unpacked groceries with practiced efficiency. Milk in the refrigerator. Bread on the counter. Apples in a bowl. When she reached the cereal box, she carefully removed the photograph. The edges had softened from years of handling. The image showed her mother smiling beside a young man near a lake. Neither looked older than 25. Sarah brushed her thumb across the picture. I wish you were here, she whispered. She did not notice Lucy watching from the doorway. You miss Grandma again? Sarah nodded. Every day. Lucy walked over and wrapped her small arms around her waist. I think she still sees us. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Maybe. Then she placed the photograph back inside the cereal box, exactly where she always kept it. She never knew why her mother had treasured that picture so much. She only knew that before she died, she had made one unusual request. Keep this safe. No matter what. At the time, Sarah thought it was simply a sentimental memory. Tonight, hundreds of miles from the questions buried in that photograph, she still believed that. What she did not know was that 3 people were now searching for answers connected to that image. One was a billionaire sitting inside a dark SUV. Another was an attorney unlocking decades-old records. And the third was a secret hidden in her mother's past that was finally beginning to find its way back into the light. The next morning began long before sunrise. Sarah's alarm sounded at 5:15, and within seconds she was out of bed. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic beginning to wake across the city. She moved carefully so she would not wake Lucy. Coffee brewed in a chipped machine on the counter while she packed a lunch using the groceries she had fought so hard to keep the night before. Half an apple, a peanut butter sandwich, a small juice box she had purchased on sale weeks earlier. It was not much, but it was enough. Across town, Nathan Brooks sat alone in his office on the 42nd floor of Brooks Capital. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, now glowing beneath the pale light of dawn. A stack of documents rested untouched on his desk. Merger reports, investment projections, board recommendations. Normally, he would have reviewed every page before sunrise. Today, he could not focus on any of them. His attention remained fixed on a worn leather journal lying open before him. Thomas Green had delivered it shortly after midnight. One of dozens recovered from Nathan's father's private archives. Nathan carefully turned another page. His father had written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Most entries discussed business, family, health. But every few months, one name appeared. Claire. Nathan leaned forward. His pulse quickened. Another entry. Another mention. Then another. The same woman appeared repeatedly across years of journals. Not as a romantic interest. Not as a relative. Something else. Someone important. He continued reading. 23 years earlier, his father had been stranded during a severe storm near a remote lake town. His vehicle had broken down. Communication lines had failed. According to the journal, a young woman named Claire had helped him reach safety. She had given him shelter, food, and assistance without knowing who he was. Without expecting anything in return. Nathan read each sentence twice, then 3 times. His father described her kindness in extraordinary detail. The way she had shared her last groceries. The way she had stayed positive despite struggling financially herself. The way she had refused money when he later tried to repay her. Nathan stared at the page. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. The same quiet strength he had seen in Sarah. The same dignity. The same refusal to accept help easily. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Thomas entered carrying a thin folder. "I found something else," he said. Nathan immediately stood. "What?" Thomas placed the folder on the desk. "Your father hired investigators several times over the years." Nathan frowned. "To find Claire?" Thomas nodded. "Apparently, he lost contact with her shortly after returning home. He searched for nearly 2 decades. Nathan slowly opened the folder. Inside were copies of letters, search requests, notes, dead ends. Hundreds of hours spent trying to locate a woman who never knew she was being searched for. Then Nathan saw a final report dated 6 years earlier. His stomach tightened. Claire Mitchell, deceased. Cancer complications. Survived by 1 daughter. Sarah Mitchell. Silence filled the office. Nathan sat down slowly. Suddenly the photograph. The cereal box. The exhausted woman in Walmart. None of it felt random anymore. Meanwhile, Sarah hurried through another difficult day. After dropping Lucy at school, she cleaned office buildings until noon. Then she delivered grocery orders across town. By late afternoon, her feet ached and her shoulders felt heavy. Yet she still smiled whenever customers opened their doors. She still thanked them. Still wished them a good day. Because kindness cost nothing. And because her mother had taught her that long ago. Shortly before sunset, Sarah received a phone call from Lucy's school nurse. Her heart immediately jumped. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Lucy is fine," the nurse reassured her. "She just had some mild breathing difficulty during recess. We followed her care plan, and she is doing much better now." Sarah closed her eyes in relief. But after ending the call, worry remained. Every prescription refill mattered. Every doctor's visit mattered. Every dollar mattered. She had no idea that somewhere across the city, a man was holding documents that connected her family to a promise made more than 20 years earlier. And for the first time since discovering the photograph, Nathan Brooks knew exactly who Sarah Mitchell was. The question keeping him awake now was far more complicated. How would he explain why her mother's kindness had never been forgotten? 2 days passed before Nathan made a decision. During that time, he learned more about Sarah Mitchell than he had expected. Not through private investigators or questionable shortcuts, but through public records, community references, and the documents his father had left behind. Every new detail seemed to confirm what the journals had described years earlier about Claire. Hardworking, quiet, generous even when she had little to give. The similarities between mother and daughter were impossible to ignore. Late Thursday afternoon, Nathan found himself standing beside the window of his office while the city below prepared for evening rush hour. Thomas sat across from him reviewing another folder. "Your father never stopped looking for her," Thomas said quietly. "Even during his rehabilitation. Even when doctors advised him to focus on his own recovery." Nathan nodded. He had spent the previous night reading journal after journal. One passage remained fixed in his mind. "Claire gave me food when she barely had enough for herself. She never asked who I was. She only asked whether I was safe. If kindness has a face, it looks like hers." Nathan slowly closed the journal. He wanted to repay her. More than that, Thomas replied. He wanted to thank her. The distinction mattered. Money settled debts. Gratitude honored people. Across town, Sarah was finishing another grocery delivery. Her old Honda rattled slightly whenever she stopped at a traffic light. The transmission problem had become harder to ignore. She gripped the steering wheel and silently prayed the car would survive another month. 1 month would give her time to save something. Anything. Her phone rang through the car speakers. "Mommy." Lucy's voice sounded unusually excited. "Guess what happened?" Sarah smiled despite her exhaustion. What happened? I got picked for the school science fair. Sarah laughed softly. That is wonderful. But I need a display board. The excitement faded slightly. Mrs. Parker said they cost about $12. Sarah glanced at the fuel gauge. Nearly empty. Her smile remained, but her heart tightened. We will figure it out. You always say that. Because we always do. After ending the call, Sarah stared through the windshield for a few extra seconds. $12 should not feel like a mountain. Yet sometimes it did. That evening she arrived home carrying takeout containers from a diner where she worked part-time. The manager often let employees bring home unsold meals at closing. It was one of the reasons she stayed. Lucy was already sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Mommy, look. She proudly held up a drawing. Sarah walked over. The picture showed 3 people holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. Who is this? Sarah asked. Lucy pointed. That is me. That is you. Then she hesitated. And that is Grandma Claire. Sarah's expression softened. You never got to meet her. I know. Lucy shrugged. But you talk about her like she is still here. Sarah looked away for a moment. Some absences never became easier. Meanwhile, Nathan sat alone in a conference room after everyone else had left. Before him rested a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter his father had never mailed. The date on the paper was 18 years old. Nathan carefully unfolded it. The letter was addressed to Claire. Thank you for helping a stranger when nobody else would. If I ever find you again, I hope I can show you what your kindness meant. Nathan read the final sentence 3 times. Then he reached for his phone. For days he had debated what to do. Whether to contact Sarah, whether to explain anything at all. But the longer he waited, the more one truth became obvious. Some promises did not belong to the people who made them. They belonged to the people who inherited them. Nathan found a number in the file Thomas had prepared. Sarah Mitchell. He stared at it for several seconds before pressing call. At that exact moment, Sarah was helping Lucy prepare for bed when her phone began ringing from the kitchen counter. She glanced at the unfamiliar number. Neither of them could have known that a conversation lasting less than 5 minutes was about to change both of their lives forever. Sarah stared at the unfamiliar number for several seconds before answering. Hello. For a brief moment, neither person spoke. Nathan suddenly realized that explaining 23 years of history to a stranger was far more difficult than it had seemed inside a quiet conference room. Sarah Mitchell, he finally asked. Yes. My name is Nathan Brooks. We met a few days ago at Walmart. Sarah immediately remembered. The man who had paid the difference at the register. The man who had looked strangely shaken after seeing her photograph. Of course, she said cautiously. Is everything okay? Nathan glanced toward the city lights beyond the glass wall. I hope so. There is something important I need to discuss with you. Something involving your mother. Silence followed. Sarah felt her grip tighten around the phone. Very few people mentioned Claire anymore. Most conversations about her mother had faded with time. My mother? Yes. Nathan chose his words carefully. I know this may sound unusual, but I believe my family has been searching for her for many years. Sarah frowned. I do not understand. Neither did Nathan completely. Not yet. Would you be willing to meet with me? Sarah's first instinct was caution. Life had taught her to be careful. People did not usually call out of nowhere with stories about long-lost connections. Yet something about Nathan's voice felt sincere. Why? She asked softly. Because I think your mother changed my father's life. The sentence lingered in the air. Sarah looked toward the kitchen table where the old photograph still rested beside Lucy's science fair papers. Tomorrow afternoon, Nathan continued. Public place. Coffee shop. Whatever location makes you comfortable. Sarah hesitated. Then she heard Lucy laughing from her bedroom while arranging stuffed animals across her blanket. The sound grounded her. Okay, she said. 1 hour. That is all I can manage. Relief crossed Nathan's face. Thank you. The next afternoon arrived wrapped in cold autumn sunshine. Sarah chose a small neighborhood cafe less than 10 minutes from Lucy's school. If anything felt uncomfortable, she could leave immediately. Nathan arrived first. He wore a simple navy sweater instead of a business suit. No security team. No assistants. No signs of the enormous wealth attached to his name. Just a man carrying a weathered leather journal beneath one arm. When Sarah entered, he stood politely. Thank you for coming. You said this was about my mother. Nathan nodded. It is. They sat near the window. Outside, leaves drifted across the sidewalk in golden waves. Inside, the scent of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. Nathan carefully placed the journal on the table. Your mother's name was Claire Mitchell. Sarah blinked. Yes. About 23 years ago, she helped a stranger during a severe storm near Lake Everett. Sarah listened quietly. Nathan opened the journal and turned it toward her. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The emotion inside the words was not. Claire gave me shelter when she had almost nothing herself. She treated me like family when she had no reason to trust me. Sarah stared at the page. Then another. And another. Every entry mentioned Claire with extraordinary gratitude. Who wrote this? She whispered. My father. Nathan's voice softened. He spent years trying to find her again. Sarah looked down. Her mother had rarely discussed that period of her life. She had mentioned helping travelers occasionally. Nothing more. There must be some mistake. There is not. Nathan slid another document across the table. It contained dates, notes, search records, decades of effort. Sarah's eyes widened. He searched for her all this time? Nathan nodded. Because she saved him when he needed help. Sarah sat back slowly. Her heart felt strangely heavy, not with sadness, with realization. All her life, she had watched her mother help people without expecting anything in return. Neighbors, co-workers, strangers. Claire had always said the same thing. Kindness is never wasted. Looking at the journal now, Sarah began to wonder if her mother had been right all along. Neither of them noticed the small envelope still resting inside the journal. An envelope containing one final letter. A letter written by Nathan's father years before his death. A letter that neither of them had read yet. And hidden inside that letter was a promise far greater than either of them imagined. Sarah carefully lifted the envelope from inside the journal. The paper had yellowed with age, and the seal had never been broken. For a moment, neither she nor Nathan spoke. The noise of the cafe faded into the background. Coffee grinders hummed. Cups clinked softly. Conversations drifted around them. Yet all Sarah could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. You have never read this? She asked. Nathan shook his head. I did not know it existed until yesterday. Sarah ran her fingers along the edge of the envelope. Her mother's name was written across the front in neat handwriting. Claire Mitchell. Seeing those words felt strangely emotional. It was as though someone from the past had suddenly reached forward through time. You should open it, Nathan said gently. Sarah nodded and carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting matched the journal entries. She began reading silently. As her eyes moved across the page, her expression slowly changed. Confusion, surprise, then disbelief. Nathan watched quietly. Finally, Sarah looked up. He remembered everything. Nathan frowned slightly. Everything. Sarah nodded. The storm, the cabin, the groceries, even the soup she made. She swallowed hard. My mother never told me any of this. Nathan leaned forward. What else does it say? Sarah lowered her eyes to the letter again. Her voice grew softer as she read aloud. Claire, if you ever receive this letter, please know that your kindness changed more than one life. It changed an entire family. There were moments when I lost faith in people. Moments when I believed success mattered more than character. Then I met you. You reminded me that the strongest people are often the ones nobody notices. Sarah paused. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Nathan remained silent. The words affected him too. They sounded exactly like his father. Honest, thoughtful, uncomplicated. Sarah continued reading. If I ever find you again, I hope I can repay even a fraction of what you gave me. Not because you asked for anything, but because gratitude should not disappear simply because time passes. Sarah slowly lowered the letter. Tears threatened to form, though she quickly blinked them away. She never knew. Nathan nodded. Neither did my father. He searched for years. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Sarah laughed softly. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound people made when life surprised them beyond explanation. My mother always helped people. I know. Sometimes it drove me crazy. Nathan looked curious. Why? Sarah smiled faintly. Because we never had much. Yet she always found someone who needed help more than we did. Her eyes drifted toward the window. She would bring meals to neighbors, watch people's children for free, give away things we could barely afford ourselves. Nathan remembered the journal entry describing Claire sharing her last groceries with a stranded stranger. The pattern suddenly made sense. She sounds remarkable. Sarah nodded. She was. Then her expression changed slightly. But none of this explains why you wanted to meet me. Nathan took a slow breath. This was the difficult part. Because my father left instructions. Sarah blinked. Instructions? Nathan reached into his briefcase and removed another document. This one was newer, typed rather than handwritten. After his death, several personal matters were placed into a trust. Sarah looked confused. Nathan continued. One section involved Claire Mitchell. The cafe suddenly felt very quiet. What kind of trust? Nathan slid the document across the table. My father believed that if he ever located your mother or her family, he wanted to help them pursue opportunities they otherwise could not afford. Sarah stared at him. Opportunities, education, housing assistance, medical support, business funding if needed. Sarah immediately shook her head. No, Nathan expected that reaction. Sarah, no, her voice remained polite but firm. My mother did not help your father for money. I know, and I do not want charity. Nathan smiled slightly. For the first time since meeting her, he felt completely certain. Claire's daughter truly was her mother's child. That is exactly what my father said you would probably say. Sarah frowned. What? Nathan pointed toward the final page. There, beneath his father's signature, was a single handwritten note. If her family refuses help, explain that this is not repayment. Kindness cannot be purchased. This is simply another act of kindness continuing its journey forward. Sarah read the handwritten note again, then a third time. The words felt different from everything else she had seen that day. They did not sound like a wealthy businessman trying to settle an old obligation. They sounded like a man who genuinely understood her mother. Slowly, she folded the document and placed it back on the table. She would have liked that sentence, Sarah said quietly. Nathan smiled. I thought you might say that. Outside, the afternoon sun had begun to sink lower across the city. Long shadows stretched across the sidewalk beyond the cafe windows. People hurried past carrying shopping bags and coffee cups, completely unaware that two strangers were piecing together a story that had started more than 2 decades earlier. I still do not know what to do with all of this, Sarah admitted. Nathan nodded. You do not have to decide today. Sarah appreciated that answer. Most people with money seemed eager to solve problems immediately. Nathan appeared more interested in listening. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Why does this matter so much to you? Nathan looked down at the journal resting between them. For several seconds, he searched for the right words. Because my father spent years teaching me that success means very little if you forget the people who helped you reach it. He glanced toward the final page of the journal. And because I think he would be disappointed if I ignored this. Sarah considered that. The answer felt honest. Not polished. Honest. Their conversation continued for nearly another hour. They talked about Claire, about Nathan's father, about memories and regrets and unexpected connections. By the time they finally stood to leave, something had changed. The distance between them no longer felt quite so large. They were still strangers in many ways. But they were strangers connected by the same story. 3 days later, Sarah sat inside a small conference room at Brooks Community Foundation. She had not planned to come. In fact, she had almost canceled twice. But Nathan had insisted on one thing. At least listen, he had said. You can say no afterward. So she listened. A foundation advisor explained educational grants, healthcare assistance programs, career development opportunities. Nothing was presented as charity. Nothing required repayment. Everything had already been funded years earlier through instructions left by Nathan's father. Sarah found herself unexpectedly emotional. Not because of the money, because of the intention behind it. Someone who barely knew her mother had remembered her kindness for more than 20 years. That realization felt bigger than any financial support ever could. Later that evening, Sarah picked up Lucy from school. The little girl climbed into the passenger seat carrying a large poster board nearly as tall as she was. Mommy, look. Sarah laughed. You got your science fair board. Lucy nodded proudly. The school said there was a special grant for students who needed help. Sarah smiled to herself. Nathan had made a few phone calls. Quietly, without asking for recognition. It was exactly the sort of thing Claire would have appreciated. A week later, another surprise arrived. Sarah received an invitation to interview for a full-time administrative position at one of the foundation's partner organizations. The salary was stable. The benefits included healthcare. The schedule would allow her to spend evenings with Lucy instead of working late shifts. For the first time in years, the future seemed slightly less fragile. That night, after Lucy had fallen asleep, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table. The old photograph rested beside her. She studied her mother's smile for a long time. Then she whispered something she had not said in years. You were right. The apartment remained silent. Yet somehow she felt less alone than she had in a very long time. Because kindness had not disappeared after all. It had simply taken 23 years to find its way back home. 6 months later, the first snow of winter drifted softly across the city. Large white flakes settled on rooftops, parked cars, and quiet sidewalks, turning ordinary streets into something almost magical. Sarah stood outside Lucy's elementary school wrapped in a warm coat she had purchased with her first steady paycheck from her new job. The position had changed many things. The endless cycle of late-night shifts had ended. The constant anxiety about rent had eased. For the first time in years, she could plan more than a few weeks ahead. But the greatest change was not financial. It was emotional. Life no longer felt like a series of emergencies waiting to happen. The school doors opened, and Lucy burst outside carrying a ribbon. "Mommy," she shouted. "I won second place." Sarah laughed as her daughter ran straight into her arms. "Let me see." Lucy proudly held up the blue ribbon from the science fair competition. The same project that had once seemed impossible because of a $12 display board now sat among the school's best entries. "Grandma would have been proud," Lucy said. Sarah smiled. She absolutely would have. Later that evening, they attended a small holiday gathering hosted by Brooks Community Foundation. Families filled the room. Children decorated cookies. Volunteers handed out hot chocolate. Soft music played in the background. Nothing about the event felt extravagant. It felt warm, human, real. Nathan stood near a decorated tree speaking with several community leaders when he noticed Sarah and Lucy arrive. Lucy immediately waved. Nathan waved back. Over the previous months, an unexpected friendship had formed. Not because of money, not because of obligation, because both of them cared deeply about the same thing, honoring the people who had taught them what kindness meant. "You made it," Nathan said as they approached. "Would not miss it," Sarah replied. Nathan looked down at Lucy. "How is our award-winning scientist?" Lucy grinned. "Second place scientist. Today, first place someday." Lucy laughed. Sarah noticed something resting beneath the Christmas tree. A framed photograph. The same photograph that had started everything. Claire standing beside Nathan's father near the lakeside dock. She walked closer. A small plaque sat beneath the frame. "In memory of ordinary kindness." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "You put it here." Nathan nodded. "My father spent years searching for the person who reminded him what truly mattered." He glanced toward the photograph. "I think both of them deserve to be remembered." For a moment they stood quietly, watching families laugh, watching children run through the room, watching lives move forward. Then Lucy tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mommy." "Yes." "Remember what Grandma always said." Sarah smiled immediately. "Which one?" Lucy thought for a second. "The one about kindness." Sarah looked at the photograph, then at Nathan, then at her daughter. "Kindness is never wasted," she said softly. Lucy nodded. "That one." Outside, snow continued falling beneath the glow of streetlights. Inside, warmth and laughter filled the room. 23 years earlier, a young woman with very little had chosen to help a stranger during a storm. She never asked for recognition. She never expected repayment. She simply did what she believed was right. And though she never lived to see the result, her kindness had traveled farther than she could have imagined. It crossed decades. It crossed grief. It crossed loss. It crossed the distance between strangers. In the end, the greatest gift Claire Mitchell left behind was not a photograph, a memory, or a story. It was proof that even the smallest act of kindness can continue changing lives long after the moment itself has passed. Because money can be spent. Success can fade. Circumstances can change. But a kind heart leaves an echo that time cannot erase.